A lot of the information I got for this episode was from the book The Law Killers by Alexander McGregor, and also the British newspaper archive.co.uk website. I'd also like to give a trigger warning, as this episode does discuss crimes against children, so listener discretion is advised. The Wilkinson family, consisting of Michael, his wife Joan, and 3 young children, lived in a flat in Gourdie Place on the Dryborough estate, located a 13-minute drive northwest of the city of Dundee. In 1971, when Michael was 24 years old, he discovered his wife was having an affair. He was furious, and he assaulted both his wife and her lover. Joan and the man she had been having an affair with then fled Dundee to live in England, leaving her 3 young children in Dundee with Michael. Joan's need to perhaps put a lot of distance between herself and Michael was not only because of the violence he had directed towards her and her lover, but also because, as was reported later in the Daily Record newspaper in 1997, Michael would become so jealous at times that he would handcuff Joan to the bed. Not long after Joan had fled to England, Michael and Joan's 2-year-old son, who was their youngest child, became ill with a liver complaint and was admitted to hospital. Following tests, he appeared to recover and was discharged from hospital. However, sadly, he relapsed and died shortly after in his father's arms. The family were distraught, and so 6 months later, when Michael happened to read an article about a 12-year-old girl needing a kidney transplant, he felt compassion for the family and he wanted to help, so they didn't have to go through the pain of losing a child like he had, and so he offered to donate his own kidney. He wasn't a match, however, but the kind and selfless offer of donating his kidney was very much appreciated. So much so that the story was picked up by local newspapers, where Michael was reported to have said he could not sit by and do nothing while a little girl lies helpless. I know what the death of a child is all about. That statement would become somewhat ironic and chilling in hindsight, but you'll find out soon enough what I mean. Also, in the subsequent couple of years following his 2-year-old son's death, Michael had a very short-lived marriage of 1 month to an 18-year-old girl, but it didn't last long because she would frequently go out with other men. In 1972, Michael was admitted to hospital twice, where he was treated for a personality disorder associated with epilepsy and depression. Due to this, he was prescribed medication for his epilepsy, however, he only took this sporadically. And then on the 17th of June 1974, any goodwill that the preceding years had afforded the now 27-year-old Michael all came crashing down. It had been a normal Monday, and Michael's 8-year-old daughter had finished school and had brought her friend, 6-year-old Pauline McIver, home to play. Michael had been there and had given his daughter some money for her to get some sweets from the local shop. Pauline said she would stay with Michael, and so Michael's daughter went to the shop herself. When she came back with the sweets, Michael and Pauline were happily playing cards in the living room, and Michael's daughter joined in and shared the sweets. However, then Michael took Pauline into the bedroom, leaving his daughter in the living room on her own. Michael's daughter then heard Pauline scream and say she wanted to go home, and then there was silence. Her father then emerged from the bedroom, and his daughter saw her friend lying on the floor. Michael told his daughter to get him a skipping rope, which she did. She then saw her father put the skipping rope around Pauline's neck, pull it tight, and punch her in the head and body. He then turned to his daughter and said, "If you tell anybody, I'll do the same to you." He then told his daughter to spray an air freshener around the flat, while he went back into the bedroom and put Pauline's body into a large suitcase and pushed it under the bed. He then returned to the living room to watch TV, and later in the evening he went to a bar and drank 3 pints of beer. When Pauline didn't return home from school, her mum, Alison, who was a 26-year-old nurse and mother to 2 other young children, became worried and had begun to try and trace her daughter. This took Alison straight to Michael Wilkinson's flat. On asking Michael if he'd seen her daughter, Michael replied that yes, she had come over after school and Pauline had played with his daughter, but that he had sent her home about 4:30 p.m. Alison thanked Michael and left to try to find where Pauline could have gone after leaving Michael's flat. However, her search proved fruitless, and so about 10:45 p.m. she finally called the police, annoyed at herself for not doing so earlier. Once the police became involved, they too were keen to speak to Michael, who told them the same story, that yes, Pauline had been at his flat and had played with his daughter, but they had sent her home about 4:30 p.m. A full-scale search was then organised, and just after midnight, a police officer sadly found the body of Pauline, having been discarded in a bin recess area at the back of the block of flats where Michael Wilkinson lived. Michael was immediately taken in for questioning, where he gave 3 statements saying exactly the same as previously. Yes, Pauline had been at his flat playing with his daughter, but they had sent her home about 4:30 p.m. However, just before his 3rd statement was completed, his appearance changed. According to the Law Killer's book, he began to sweat profusely, with his brow, upper lip and hands all becoming moist. He then uttered the words, "I will have to tell someone anyway. Wait a minute, I can't remember it all, but it was me that done it." Following a post-mortem, it showed, according to the Press and Journal on the 27th of September 1974, that Pauline's death was due to asphyxia, that there were superficial injuries to her head, and that she had been sexually assaulted. On the 13th of September 1974, Michael appeared in court in Dundee, where he was charged with committing an indecent act on and murdering 6-year-old Pauline Jane McIver, alleging, according to the Evening Express newspaper on the 13th of September 1974, that he had struck Pauline on her face and body with his fists, indecently assaulted her, compressed her throat, and murdered her. He also faced 2 further charges of indecent and libidinous practices and behaviour in his house against 2 12-year-old girls on the 24th of December 1973 and 2 girls of 13 and 14 years old between the 1st of March and 30th of April 1974. Michael Wilkinson's solicitor pleaded not guilty to these charges on his behalf. A trial date was then set for Thursday the 26th of September at the High Court in Dundee, where Michael's solicitor lodged a special defence of insanity at the time of the murder, and therefore him not being responsible for his actions. On the first day of the trial, Michael Wilkinson's 8-year-old daughter, who had been friends with Pauline and had witnessed her father murdering her in their flat, took to the stand, where she quietly recounted to a stunned courtroom that her father had taken Pauline into a bedroom and closed the door, that she had heard screaming after that, and that when her father opened the door again, she saw Pauline lying on the floor. She then said to a silent courtroom, "Daddy told me to get a skipping rope. He put it round Pauline's neck and pulled it tight." She said that he also punched her friend on the head before putting Pauline's body in a suitcase, putting the suitcase under a bed, and then later carrying the suitcase out of the flat and returning shortly afterwards with an empty suitcase. She told how he had then warned her that he would do the same to her if she told anyone. Michael Wilkinson's 8-year-old daughter then turned to her father and smiled, looking for reassurance from him that she had done the right thing. However, she was met with the blank, staring face of her father. On the 2nd and final day of the trial, Dr. Hector Fowley, a psychiatrist for the defence who had interviewed Michael Wilkinson, took to the stand. According to the Evening Express newspaper on the 27th of September 1974, Dr. Fowley told the court that when he had interviewed Michael and asked him if he had murdered Pauline, he'd said, "I sort of came to, and when I saw her right away, I thought I had done it. I was frantic because I thought I had killed her, but I didn't know how I had killed her." He also told Dr. Fowley that he had removed Pauline's socks and knickers and washed them, and also washed Pauline's body before placing her body in a suitcase and putting it under the bed. Then, despite saying he had been frantic, he sat and watched TV. About 11:15 p.m, he said he carried the suitcase with Pauline's body in it to the bin recess area at the back of the block of flats, where he placed Pauline's body. He then took the suitcase back to his flat and cleaned off any blood that had transferred, and threw her washed socks and knickers out of one of the windows in the flat. Dr. Fowley confirmed that Michael Wilkinson had an epileptic condition that he was supposed to be taking drugs for, but that he was doing so sporadically, and that he had been admitted to hospital twice in 1972 for depression. From his examination and interviews with Michael Wilkinson, Dr. Fowley said, according to an article in the Evening Express newspaper, that he thought the balance of probability was that Michael Wilkinson was insane at the time of the killing. and Mr. Donald Rushton from Dundee University took to the stand and basically backed this up by saying, according to the Press and Journal on the 27th of September 1974, that he thought the whole nature of the assault raises the question of mental responsibility. However, when Dr. Fowley was advised of the evidence given by Michael Wilkinson's daughter in the court the day before, he did say that in light of this, his opinion then was that Michael Wilkinson was suffering from diminished responsibility due to him suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy and associated personality disorders. Dr. Fowley then stated that he would recommend that Michael Wilkinson be sent to Carstairs State Mental Hospital in central Scotland without limit of time. Following all evidence, testimonies and opinions being given, and once the defence, prosecution and judge had summed up, the jury then left to deliberate. When they returned, the charge of murder had been dropped to culpable homicide of Pauline McIver, and Michael Wilkinson was unanimously found guilty of this, with his plea of diminished responsibility being rejected. He was also found guilty of using indecent practices towards two 12-year-old girls, but found not guilty on the charge of indecent and libidinous practices and behaviour relating to the 13 and 14-year-old girls. The judge then told Michael Wilkinson that he would be sent to Carstairs without limit of time. He was then led away. It's unknown what happened to Michael Wilkinson's children, with their mother having left them to start a new life in England, and their father now being sent to Carstairs without limit of time. Michael's first appeal against him being kept in Carstairs without limit of time came in 1986 and again in 1992, with both appeals being rejected. In November 1995, a report was prepared by a doctor at Carstairs which stated, according to the Herald newspaper, that there remains an unacceptable risk that Michael will offend again against children. Michael Wilkinson's third appeal against his continued detention at Carstairs was heard by Sheriff Frank Keane in April 1997 at Lanark, almost 23 years after Michael Wilkinson's conviction and when he was 50 years old. The appeal argued that while Michael Wilkinson was a paedophile, because he was not suffering a mental disorder as stated under the Mental Health Act, the act that he was being detained under, and paedophilia not being a mental disorder that was covered under the Mental Health Scotland Act, he should be allowed his freedom. Sheriff Keane heard from 5 psychiatrists, 3 of which said that Michael Wilkinson was suffering from a mental health disorder, while 2 said that he wasn't. One psychiatrist, according to the Herald newspaper, said that their view was that sexual deviancy was only part of Michael Wilkinson's personality disorder, and that he was not a straightforward paedophile. This psychiatrist diagnosed Michael Wilkinson as suffering from mental disorder characterised by antisocial personality disorder manifested by egocentricity, lack of feeling for others, and lack of remorse for past offences. Another doctor felt that Michael Wilkinson was suffering from, primarily, a personality disorder with features of paedophilia. Following hearing these reports, Sheriff Keane went with the 3 psychiatrists' views and deemed that Michael was suffering from a mental health disorder that went beyond him solely being a paedophile, which in turn warranted his detention at Carstairs, and therefore he rejected his appeal. However, Michael Wilkinson was not happy with this decision and petitioned that a review take place of this decision by the Court of Session in Edinburgh, which was heard in October 1997 by Lord Marnoch. At the Court of Session, Michael Wilkinson argued that no evidence had been available to Sheriff Keane that showed any abnormally aggressive or seriously irresponsible behaviour as a manifestation of a personality disorder, as stated under the Mental Health Act, and he felt that the only evidence that had been presented was in relation to treatment for paedophilia. Michael Wilkinson's appeal review was also being opposed by the Secretary of State, as he believed that Michael was suffering from a mental disorder, as well as being a paedophile, and therefore that he should not be released. During one of Michael Wilkinson's many visits to the Court of Session, as he was being escorted out of the court, a young man that had been sitting in the courtroom listening to proceedings approached him, punched him hard on the jaw, and called him a bastard. This man was reportedly a member of Pauline McIver's family. Following Lord Marnock's review of the case, he too dismissed Michael Wilkinson's appeal against his detention at Carstairs. Not to be deterred, though, Michael Wilkinson and his solicitors took one final punt and appealed against this decision to a bench of 3 judges. And the appeal decision took place in February 1999, when Lord McCluskey said that all 3 judges considered that Lord Marnock had reached the correct conclusion and that Michael Wilkinson's appeal was again being refused. This final refusal was welcomed by all, especially staff at Carstairs, who were alarmed at the prospect of his release, with one saying in the Scottish Daily Record that Michael was a typical child killer, in that he has never caused any problems and is a model patient, but that he has never discussed his crime or shown any signs of remorse, with the same staff member going on to say that Michael Wilkinson was a dangerous psychopath who would reoffend if he was set free. February 1999 was the last I could find anything about Michael Wilkinson. If he is still alive, he will be about 75 years old and presumably is still detained at Carstairs State Mental Hospital after 48 years.